All right, hello everybody. So we are about to do something new that we have never done before. So I cannot vouch for how this is gonna go, but I think it will be entertaining. I think you will have a good time. So we're gonna do a live podcast. As some of you may know, we recently rolled out something that we're calling the Spotlight Podcast. And the reason why I started doing this was I'm really passionate about education. So educating revenue managers, getting people excited about what we do, commercial strategy. So that first season, if you go and listen to it, there's a lot of teachable moments in there. And we've recently pivoted to video. So now what we're doing is we're interviewing lots of industry leaders like today, Kerry and Jennifer. So just want to give you a little bit more background as well. Where can you find these podcast episodes if you have not seen it or are not familiar? Check us out on YouTube. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify. So in kind of a very circuitous way, I'm kind of asking you guys to smash that like and subscribe button. Okay. Yeah, so let's go ahead and have some fun. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and call on our guests to the stage. So please welcome our guests, and we'll get intros here in just a second. So first, before I reveal our theme, let's do a couple of intros. So I think everybody already knows Blake, right? Hello. Okay, cool. All right, so very quick for me, my name is Daniel Foreman. I'm a commercial strategist here at Lighthouse. I've recently joined the marketing team, and before this, I had about a 10-year background in revenue management. So that's my story. But Kerry, can we get a little intro from you?
Hi, Kerry. Kerry Mack, Chief Revenue Officer for Highgate Hotels. For those of you who don't know Highgate, we have about 460 hotels. We're owner, operator, brands, independents, have been around a long time. I think our big claim to fame in the city is we've been the largest owner-operator in New York City for forever and a day. Our recent big purchases were the owners of Viceroy brand, but big franchisees of Hilton, Marriott, Hyatt, IHG. So we pretty much do everything.
And Jennifer?
I don't know if mine is working. Thank you. Jennifer Driscoll. I am with Ivy Hospitality. I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary with them, and very excited to be with them. We're a owner-operator in the Midwest. We have all the big 4 major brands. We're mostly select service extended stay hotels, owner-operator, and then we also do third-party.
Perfect. So our theme today is what I titled Revenue Management Rebels. So what we're going to talk about is, it's going to be good, just knowing the amount of leadership experience that we have up on the stage right now. I want to talk about ways that we can think differently about revenue management. So specifically times where we've gone against the grain, we've been contrarian, sometimes if that's the contrarian voice of reason, and most of all, not being afraid of failure and not being afraid to fail. So what's coming next is we're each going to give some anecdotes of a time where we failed. So this alone will be worth price of admission, right? You're going to hear some good blackmail stories. So I'll start. So here's a time where I failed as a revenue manager. I used to work with this fabulous management company on the East Coast, and they had a really, really nice hotel in Philly. And you can imagine in, Philadelphia in the summers, you have a lot going on. You have rowing, you have lacrosse, you've got all the universities, you got everything going on. So they came to me and they said, hey, Daniel, we need you to revise our discount strategy. So I ran the numbers, I did all this stuff, and I was like, okay, we need to be at a 5% advance purchase rate. This is the perfect number, 5%. Percent being the operative word here, right? So I went into HPP, so I'm narrowing down the brand, right? And I updated our discount strategy, but instead of putting in 5%, I put in $5 flat. So I got a call at 1 a.m. asking why we had 24 $5 advanced purchase rates. But I came out on top because there was a thunderstorm that weekend and they tried to cancel the advanced purchase. So we got $125 Non-refundable revenue, you guys. So really, it was actually a very big brain move. So Blake, I'm going to move to you next. So what's your story?
A failure?
A failure.
Does it have to be something that happened in office, or could it be a work-related but definite failure?
For extra incriminating points, it can be a personal failure.
I have many. Okay. So this is work-related, but didn't happen in office. So this was a few months after I graduated college, and I'm living in New York City. And I am not going to say where I worked or the name of the people involved to protect the innocent. So first job out of college, a few months, and I went to Cornell, and Cornell plays Boston University every year at Madison Square Garden in a hockey game. So naturally, my friends and I got tickets. So we show up, and the usher brings us to our seats, and they seat me and my friends right behind one of the partners and his family at my new firm, my new job. So we say hi to each other, we smile, we laugh, and we carry on. A few minutes later, he turns around, and he goes, Blake, I want to introduce you to and he points to the person next to him. He goes, Blake, I want to introduce you to I go, oh, is this your son? It was his wife. This is a true story that happened to me, and it ruined the hockey game, and then some.
Nice.
Faceplant moment. And what did I learn from that? I learned to let people finish their sentences.
All right, so I'm turning to you, Kerry. What's a good story?
Well, the year was 1998, and it was the last mistake I actually ever made in revenue management. I was the director of revenue at the Algonquin, and very much like your story, I went to go put in the rate as $199, and I put in $19.90. And it took a while to catch that mistake back then because all reservations were sent to you on a fax machine, and you had to wait for them to come in, and then you had to wait for the reservation agents to manually type them in. And it wasn't until 24 hours later that you started to see these faxes come in with these crazy rates. And one of the union reservation agents finally said, this feels wrong that we're putting in $19.90 over and over. Is this like a new thing? And I said, oh my God. The rest of you didn't say anything? So that was it.
How many were made?
And then my new favorite best practice after that, which is still a best practice to this day, is you always, always, always look at the reservations booked on by report, which is the Bible, because you never know what you accidentally put in. And no matter how many safeguards you have in a system, these mistakes still happen.
All right, next up.
All right, mine's a little different. It was at the beginning of my time in revenue management, and I was at a hotel that was very much overperforming. We were hitting all of our KPIs, we're making budget, and I was going into a consultation with a brand thinking, what could they talk about? I did everything perfect. And vividly remember the regional revenue manager from the brand going, but I think you left a lot of money on the table because if you look at your mix of sales, you sold a whole lot of government business. And I was like, wait, but I was successful. I hit all my KPIs. So I think from that time and that situation, I learned that it's not always about, and we have to pay attention to those that are underperforming, right? And there's a lot of attention on those hotels that are underperforming, but there's those hotels in the middle of the pack and at the top of the pack, and there's a lot of money on the table there. So I think that was my learning very early on, and to this day, I preach this at my company to say, yep, there's things that are driving those underperforming hotels that might be out of my control. I think we got to pay more attention to those in the middle of the pack and at the top of the pack.
Nice. Yeah.
The government employees pay the most, right? That's the best. That's the highest rated, right? I thought it was the highest. I wanted to confirm we were talking about the same thing.
Nice. And I think from those stories, because I'm sure that we all have some of those stories ourselves, a lot of times good things can happen from those stories, right? So by making those kind of mistakes, that's actually, it led to not me specifically, not that mistake, but over time that happens a couple times, we rolled out the Rev Pack. So within BI, you actually you have that accountability. So you have to update exactly what's in there so everybody knows what the discount percentage is. Cool. So
Should we jump into some questions?
yeah, let's jump to some questions.
All right. So this is for either one of you, whoever wants to jump in first. So obviously we're all here to learn, and I'm not asking you to spill the secret sauce necessarily, but what is something unique about your teams that you think is maybe different from how other teams function? Maybe it's a weekly meeting that you guys do, or a KPI that you guys track that you find is specifically beneficial for your teams.
I know for us, it's a buzzword. It's just the collaboration piece. It's breaking down those silos and having KPIs that are aligned. Because if you have all your disciplines with different KPIs, they're not all going to have the same goal in mind. So collaboration is real big, both at the property level. It's not just about a revenue manager getting on a revenue call and preaching about the data. It's about the conversation. It's about the opportunities, but both at the property level and also at the support level above property. We've got VP collaborations that involve all of us from sales, revenue, and operations too, because it's very critical. They have to execute on our plans at the property level. And then we also, within our organization, have a VP of owner success, and he is the voice of our company, and so he's aligned with all the disciplines, and he reports back to ownerships as our voice of the brand, and so he's very, he understands what's going on and can tell the story. And we use a whole lot of data, and that data is available to everybody. It's available to ownerships, or a Lighthouse prescription is available to anyone, and we expect all the disciplines to use it. Operations and sales and revenue and asset management, everyone's using it.
I think for us, our big thing has always been that our directors of revenue are also in charge of digital marketing and e-commerce strategy, and that even if a hotel has a marketing manager, it's the director of revenue that really leads the strategy. I think we touched on it in one of the earlier sessions that distribution costs are really high, and having a handle on that is really important as part of the overall picture. And obviously your best cost of distribution is your hotel website. So understanding how do you drive that business, how do you get more people, eyes on your website, and also the spend, right? So a lot of that comes down to math and ROI and what's working on that. And an analytical mindset around that is really important. So yes, we lean on the marketing team for what I call the making it pretty portion of it. But the director of revenue should really be the one leading when what the messaging is, when an ad needs to be changed, what the message of the email blast is, when strategy needs to be changed, when the spend needs to be changed, where the spend needs to be changed. And that's really been our MO for years now, and I think it's really helped our overall performance for direct booking.
You said directors are responsible for the strategy. Mm-hmm. How do you guys empower more junior members of your team, mm-hmm. while at the same rate also obviously making sure that we don't do $5
right.
super sales for the
well, listen, if you are an analyst at Highgate, you are an analyst because you're expected to become a director of revenue. So to us, that's really a training ground for you to get to the next level. So throughout your time as an analyst, you're given more and more responsibility. Usually the changing of the rate portion is limited to basic stuff until you are trusted to do the more complex stuff. And changing, I'd say travel ad spend is probably earlier on the list because that's easy to manage and something you could sort of take on earlier and see how it changes demand or changes pickup or monitoring an ROI, right? So it sort of comes in steps and it goes with, I'd say, the skill level of the analyst in the market. Listen, we've had some analysts that have jumped to director of revenue in less than a year. Some it's taken 2 years, and some move on to other departments.
Nice. I want to circle back to something, actually, Jennifer, you had said a little bit earlier when we were talking about, I think, like your top performers and bottom performers. So here is a question and a setup, right? Within our portfolios, there are going to be times where we have, 1 or 2 bottom performer hotels, right? And a lot of times they
One or two.
and a lot of times those hotels can kind of suck up the attention from the other hotels that are maybe middle of the pack or maybe even actually doing really, really well. So how do you drive engagement with those teams and make sure that they're still being heard and that the lower end, more problem child hotels aren't, getting all the attention all of the time? Any thoughts on that one?
I know for me, it's managing to the top, and you have to celebrate those hotels that are doing really well. They can sometimes just fall under the radar, right? I have a saying that revenue covers a multitude of sins, and you've got to reach out to those and give them love. So, on a weekly, when we get those weekly stars, I really try to send out those notes to really give those attaboys and congratulations to the hotels that are doing well. I mean, we're not paying attention to those that are not doing well, but those in the middle who's got a good change. What was a positive change that I can then spur them on to want to continue to do better. We're also doing some stuff through this year, planning on creating a performance trip based on really high performers in the portfolio that will start next year. And we are also doing Bonusly, which is a point system that we can go and give to both property level people, management, and everything, that they get points. And so then they're rewarded for their behaviors and the things that they did, that then they can go use and buy different things online.
Nice. I like that, yeah.
It's not every day you hear of an industry where you need to really build up the high performers. Usually it's, make sure they feel good about themselves.
Here is another, I think, will be a good question. I think we're going to get some good answers on this one. But how do we stay the voice of reason in the face of unrealistic expectations and optimism? And doesn't just have to be budget season, but just in general. Because there are a lot of times where people, they want to hear, yes, we're going to grow 6% in RevPAR this year, right? So how do we stay that voice of reason and be that voice of reason in the room?
We are we encourage all of our revenue teams to lead with data first. And that despite what you are being asked to budget, forecast, whatever it might be, that you have to come with your data behind you. And it's not just what we're telling them to say, but, have your CBRE, have your LARC reports, have your STAR forecast, have Demand 360, have every data point available, have what you picked up last year. Don't just come and say, no, we can't do it. Show the real reasons why and show the real expectations as to how you think you can get to a fair in-between, or what you think you realistically can get to, what you think a push goal could be, and what the number would have to be to get to the number they're asking you to get to. Because sometimes when you lay it out that way, it becomes a much more reasonable conversation, instead of just sort of digging your heels in and saying, well, no, you've lost your mind. So you have to have the data behind it. And that's our job, is to explain the data in a reasonable way.
Nice. Anything to add to that, Jennifer?
It's the storytelling, right? It's to make sure that you can both manage up and manage down. And you have to be in an environment that's safe to tell an owner or your CEO, that's just not going to work. You also have to be in an environment that you're able to take risks and not get beaten up. And I'm very fortunate to be in that environment where I can go to my CEO and tell him, you know what, this is not gonna work like we want, or you know what, let's try. And sometimes we win, sometimes we fail, but that's where we learn the most. Is sometimes there's failures, you just have to pivot really quickly.
Right. Nice. Yeah.
Kerry, you queued me up for a nice question here. Thank you for saying what you did with leading with the data. I'm going to ask Dave and Brett to cover their ears for this question, because it goes against what we stand for as a company. However, I think it's a relevant question, and I'd like to ask it. So obviously we lead with the data.
Yeah.
Of course. However, are there ever times where you deliberately go against the data and almost let your intuition be your guide and just go contrary to the data because you really have a feeling about something?
Yes. and both ways. Well, one time, sometimes it bites you in the butt to do that. But, listen, there are things that RMS systems just can't pick up yet. And I think through time and years of AI developing, it'll get there. But that is why you have to know how an RMS works, what drives it, and what the mechanisms behind it are, and why you don't let an analyst make decisions for a few years because you need to have that life experience to see beyond what it's telling you, right? So, I think what's happening in the world right now is a great example, right? That right now, pace looks pretty decent for a lot of our leisure markets for the summer. But do we have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt? I think so. I think that there is a real fear that as we get closer to the summer, that might continue to drop off and that there might be a backlash of leisure travel to the U.S. So you might want to take, depending on what your hotel is, you might want to take a conservative approach and start ramping up pace above what you would normally do this time of year, right? And even though the system's not telling you to do that. So yes, I do think your intuition about factors beyond what you can see is a hugely important role. And I think that's why the definition of revenue management is it's an art and a science, right? There is an art to what we do.
Mm-hmm. So there are limitations to revenue management systems, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Right now, yes.
Maybe my one yield forecast is not. Just kidding.
Did you have any?
Absolutely agree. There is intuition. You had to have it's about your gut, and sometimes you're going to win, and sometimes you're going to lose. And being in an environment where you can take those risks are very rewarding for me. You've got to. There's so many uncertainties right now, and I think my message to my hotels is we've got to group up. Right, we've got to get that good base. I think Hilton just put out an alert recently that are really honing in on those hotels that are outperforming other hotels. Really have a strong, good base, and we've got to put that on the books smartly. Right, you don't want a wrong length of stay or the wrong rated business, but you also don't want to be overpriced. I do see that a lot of times that DOS gets too aggressive in their pricing, and then they want to hold transient hostage. And I'm like, no, we're not going to do that, right? Because I have to sell the rest of the hotel.
That's a great point you make, because a lot of the stuff that we discuss on our various podcasts and webinars is not losing the base demand, how critical that is. How do you drive rate without, confidently drive rate without risking losing that base? Because that base is critical. How do you actually balance that?
To me, it's about, I always say it's not what you quote, it's what you sell, right? So you have to have your retail rates positioned properly, and then you have to be aligned, sales has to be aligned. So they have to know where they need that business and how low they can go from a cost per occupied room perspective, so that, how low do I go or how high do I need to go? But either situation, you could get burned if it's not right.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to give you guys an opportunity to brag for a second, because I feel people are generally humble, but I want you to, if it's okay, I'd love to say, could you give us an example of a time where you had a big turnaround story? You were indexing 80, 85, whatever that number was, and you guys put some, fixes in place, or you guys, tightened the screws, and you guys kind of turned around a property. Do you have any good examples of that?
Yeah. We do it all the time. No, I think some of our bragging stories have always been how we've been able to use certain programs to our advantage through the years. There was, I think a few New York people in this room know this story, but, there was a time in New York City where Highgate ran a ton of Hiltons in the city and a ton around Times Square, and they had just changed their redemption program, and they structured it in a way that made it sort of beneficial to the hotels if you could sort of use it in the right way. And I remember sitting in the room with them saying, oh my God, I can get $10,000 out of you on New Year's Eve. And they said, there's no way. I said, yeah, I can. Very easily. I have views of Times Square ball drop. And we did. So those were like big wins for us back in the day before all the programs changed. Those were, I'd say those were sort of the fun, rebel, wild days.
I think it's about those learnings that it's all about pricing. You have to be priced right. And, I think revenue management, everyone's perception is the only way you can raise ADR is raise rate. And actually, it's probably it's the opposite of that. You've got to be positioned properly and focus on your retail contribution, because that's what's going to drive rate at the end of the day. And we've seen some really good successes when we shift that strategy to do that. And not necessarily always rely on the data in front of us that could say, well, this is how so-and-so is priced, but are they really achieving that at the end of the day?
So we have a few minutes left, so I do want to turn it over, if anybody in the audience has any questions or comments, or if we want to do any kind of closing statements, we can. Does anybody have anything else to add? Revenue management rebel, around that revenue management rebel theme? Has anyone been doing anything rebellious that you can say aloud?
Here.
Okay, never mind. All right, cool. So, yeah. That wraps up this live episode of the Spotlight Podcast. So I hope everybody here had a good time. And yeah, we were the guinea pigs for this live experiment, but I think it went well. So let's give our guests a round of applause. Thank you so much, Jennifer Driscoll and Kerry Mack. We appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you, guys.